Nationally recognized civil rights lawyer, named as one of the best lawyers under 40 in 2007. She is the founder and chief executive officer for the Center for American Liberty. We welcome Harmeet Dillon to the program. Hi, Harmeet.
Yes. Hi. Thanks for having me.
So I can't wrap my arms around this crazy Facebook defense that their fact checks are protected opinions. And so we can't push back on them while they say we're liars. How's that work?
Well, I don't think it works. We've seen this phenomenon now for several years. I've seen it with various clients of my firm where they're respected journalists or writers, and they put up material on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on other platforms. YouTube is another. And, these companies have been sued many times. I've sued various of these companies many times on different theories. And because of a law called Communications and Decency Act, Section 230, these companies have basically been allowed a government protection from the type of defamation that you or I would be liable for if we said false things about people in other forums. And so in this case, as many of your viewers may know, when you're reading an article, and maybe an article you like, and you go to share it, or even without going to share it, a label pops up that warns you that, this article that you're reading and you're about to share is false, partly false, fake news, basically, and then sometimes even getting into some details as to what's false about it. And that's what happened here with John Stossel, who's a respected journalist with decades of experience, and he's creating independent content now. And on his Facebook page, he posted a couple of videos about two different climate change topics. And one was about the forest fires that have consumed California over recent years and in 2020, and what caused them. And he was interviewing experts on forest fires. And then in the other one, he's talking about a variety of claims by climate activists about everything being caused by climate change, hurricanes, fires, you name it. And so how these companies try to get around them being called defamers, Facebook and these other big companies, is they hire, and I imagine my air quotes here, they hire independent fact checkers who are really activists themselves, of course. They let loose the hounds of independent fact checkers on helpless users of these platforms who are not allowed to fight back, and they rip them to shreds as if it's some kind of a blood sport. And there's no appeal process. And so, this climate change group that was tasked with reviewing this one is some French outfit, very biased. A review of their reviews of people's posts shows that in the case of authors who are perceived as conservative, they routinely rate them as false or mostly false. Lacking context is another nice one that they like to use.
Yeah.
But in this case, they really got it wrong here. They factually wrong. They attributed to John a statement that he didn't make, namely that he said that climate played no role in forest fires. And in fact, he actually said that climate very well may play a role in fires, but it certainly doesn't explain California's fires. And there are other explanations that have to do with government behavior and choices. And then in the other one, similarly, they basically smear him with misleading, lacking context, partially false, contains factual inaccuracies. So that's the label on the more general video. Now, if you're a journalist who's devoted his whole career to getting it right and elucidating the truth to the public, labeling somebody's post as partly false, contains factual inaccuracies, is devastating. It would be like telling the world, fixing a label to lawsuits that I filed, that they're, that they're sanctioned, that they've been sanctioned when they haven't.
Well, honestly, it is like instead of taking all the news fit to print and changing the subtitle of the New York Times to contains factual inaccuracies.
Right. lacking context, or
lacking
misleading.
context. Yeah, you would. The
Right.
New York Times would never become the New York Times if that had to be printed on the front page of every newspaper. And it's true
Right.
about the New York Times.
It's true about the New York Times, and so now these guys are playing a shell game. So we sued them, but we didn't just sue them. We wrote them letters first. The French, climate change outfits, and and Facebook, now Meta, and they changed their name in the middle of this case, and they wrote back saying, "Oh no, this is infotainment, basically. This is our opinion. It isn't fact checking at all, although it says fact checkers and fact checking on it." And we didn't buy it. I mean, this was devastating to John. It drove his viewership down hugely, and for social media writers, that's revenue, that's credibility, that's your professional reputation, that's what you're labeled maliciously with in Wikipedia when you die, purveyor of false videos about the climate. So that's a stench that doesn't wash off, and there's no place to wash it off. So he sued as a last resort over this issue, and Facebook responded. This is just our opinion. This isn't meant to be fact. You aren't meant to take it literally when we say fact checkers. So it's kind of an Orwellian, almost ridiculous situation. But
so where does this go from
black and white?
Where does this go from here?
Well, there'll be an argument in front of the judge. Interestingly, our case has bounced around so far amongst two judges. The second judge just got nominated and confirmed to the Ninth Circuit last week. So we're probably going to be awaiting hearing in front of a third judge to see, what happens with this case. And look, Meta has overwhelming resources, and they just brush these claims aside. And I've dealt with their quote unquote fact checkers before. And Glenn, your listeners may not know what this industry of fact checkers is. They're, again, air quotes, nonprofits. They usually employ washed up or, sort of journalists who don't want to work that hard anymore, or activists, or both. Some from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. I've dealt with some very esteemed former journalists who now work for these outfits, and all day long, their job is, slap false labels on as many of your enemies and opponents and people who disagree with you as possible, laugh quietly, and go out for a cocktail. That's the deal, and it's not right. And if you or I did this and called a journalist's work false, partly false, lacking context, that would be harmful, and you or I could get sued. So the same should be true of Facebook. And Communications Decency Act Section 230 is not, as these big tech companies repeatedly claim, a license to lie, smear, defame, and devastate users.
But that's exactly what it does over and over and over again. We have had fact checks from these same people. We've had fact checks where they claimed that something we said was false because it comes from a study that on page 435 made another claim that we weren't making that was proven false.
Right.
But because the part that wasn't false was also in that same study with something that was, we were fact checked as wrong. And it's like, wait.
Right. And when you look at the label, I'm just reading from it from our complaint. The label, big box, missing context, and then it says from independent fact checkers, and then there's another little label, fact check. Science, climate change, etc. And then it says about this notice, independent fact checkers say this information is missing context and could mislead people. And then it says, learn more about how Facebook works with independent fact checkers to stop the spread of false information. So it goes on to say this is false. So, I don't know how much more clear you can be. So claiming it's news to me. And by the way, they're asking every user of Facebook to somehow guess that they're fact check is simply
an opinion.
Their opinion commentary.
Right. So. And on top of it, they not only label you with that, but they also then, the algorithm shoves you down. And on top of that, now I've noticed some of them are not even letting you share the story. You can't, it's there. It'll say it's false. But if you try to share the story because you disagree with their opinion, you can't even share the story. I mean, it's a gulag system at Facebook. What can the average person do?
Well, the average person can follow this lawsuit, talk about it, mock Facebook. I don't know. And, we have to eventually, hopefully, find some platforms that don't lie, defame, steal our information, and play games. But ultimately, Glenn, the only remedy for this, for the citizens, for the users of social media around the world, is our members of Congress and our president, when they are right-thinking people, need to change Communications Decency Act Section 230 to make it clear that it is no longer appropriate for these companies to use its protections as a complete carte blanche for doing whatever they want. There have to be some norms and some rules. There should be a user's bill of rights. There needs to be an appeals process for this. And these companies have to face some form of liability, because so far, court after court after court has let them out scot-free. And frankly, even conservative think tanks, and I'm using those air quotes again, and conservative nonprofits and conservative lawmakers have all bought the big tech lobbyist propaganda that these types of quote-unquote protections for these trillion-dollar corporations are necessary to ensure free speech.
Yeah.
No, they aren't. They're no more necessary to ensure free speech than taking away defamation liability is necessary for you or I or the New York Times to stop defaming people. It is, in fact, that liability that reins people in from going too far. So we all know the difference between a fact check and an opinion, and nobody's suing over an opinion here. They're suing over a false accusation of lying in an article.
Exactly right. Thank you so much, Harmeet Dillon. We'll be watching this, and our best to John Stossel and everybody on your team. Thank you.